there has become like embarrassment of riches of good resources out there about unhealthy leadership, especially in our faith communities. Chuck DeGroat wrote the book, When Narcissism Comes to Church. He talked a lot about Enneagram. And he said, I had asked him about this, and I wondered about your thoughts on it too, is that how do we know somebody isn't just co-opting the words? Like there's this full vulnerability, he calls it, where like they say the right things, but they aren't really doing the inner work. So what would be some signs you would say of like
Oh,
good or bad?
what a great question. I remember years ago, the guy that trained me in the Enneagram is a guy named Rich Plass. He wrote a book called The Relational Soul. It's an incredible book. I remember years ago, Rich saying to me, one of the most dangerous things that can happen is when we commandeer the language without doing the work. And I do think that one of the things that we have seen on repeat, not just in the church, we have seen it culture wide, is what happens when we are taken in by charisma and talent over character. I think that there is a deep need for us as people to pay very close attention to someone's character. How do you feel when you're in their presence? Do you feel that they are really trying within their skill set to listen to you and pay attention to you and love you? Do you feel like every time the phone rings and it's them, that they want something, that they're not really in it for you? So I think one of the things is that as I get older, I am still very much taken when I meet somebody that has a profound amount of talent and they're incredible orators or great writers or brilliant, strategists. I still can appreciate those gifts, but I am really dialed into character. Is this person off the stage the same as they are on stage? Is this person, when I am with them, do I hear them speak about other people in ways that are loving and kind? Do I see within them a desire to really try to walk in the life and the lifestyle of Jesus? Or does that all just kind of feel like, in the same way that like the business world sort of has their own sort of lingo and language? Is this person really just doing the current sort of church language that's kind of in vogue? But when you're around them, you just get a sense like they're not the same person that they are trying to call me to be. And I'm not saying that we need to ask for perfection. I really appreciate Tim Keller has, done this book on forgiveness and that just came out. And I appreciate that. I think we live in an age where now we're so hurt that the standards that we demand people to live up to because of our own pain, because we can't stand the idea that we could be betrayed again, our tolerance for other people's imperfections are just now so low. So when somebody behaves a certain way, is that a pattern? Is it something you've seen them do over 5 years, 10 years? Or is it just, this is a one-off, or this is just a season? So I think it just takes time. And I think it's a lot of paying attention to what do you sense the character of this person is. I will take somebody who is not as strong of an orator who has incredible character over the opposite.
Yeah, I resonate so very deeply. I mean, I asked that, partly because, this is like autobiographical, for our family. We moved to Middle Tennessee for my husband to take a job for Ramsey Solutions. And we were taken in by the charisma and so excited and so happy to be chosen. But slowly we just realized, things behind the curtain weren't the same as they were on the front of the curtain, and everything imploded. And making sense of the fact that like, oh, they did Enneagram training. They did a big thing, they did a big disc push early on. And then they started doing things with Enneagram and thinking, people can say the right thing in the right environment and still not have done that introspection. And man, that's hard. But I do like how you have said there is a difference between a pattern of behavior and somebody that is just a little bit unhealthy and like misunderstandings or differences in opinion. Like not every difference of opinion is abusive, right?
Yeah,
Not
right.
every like conflict with somebody is abusive. We live in a world where we don't all agree with things. And so I think it is hard. It's a hard tension, I think, probably for my listeners as well, to like hold this idea that we know that there are people out there that are really unhealthy and we don't want to be hurt again. But we also don't want that new faithful pastor to have to hold the burden of all of the terrible things that the previous guy did, right? Like we also had a pastor that plagiarized every word of every sermon he ever preached, like every word, like even the personal stories. He used someone else's, like they were Mark Driscoll's life. We didn't know. I thought his favorite food was XYZ because these stories he told us, but no, they were someone else's, right? And all that is crazy. And so I want to just push into that a little bit more. Like, how do we move? How do we live in this space where it's just really complicated?
Yeah.
We don't want to be cynical all the time. Are there some tools that you have learned that help people that have experienced that pain? Is it just something we need to do in our own work, our own selves?
Yeah, here's the first thing that comes to mind. I was listening to the podcast Radio Lab a couple days ago, and they did an episode called Apologetica, and it was about basically how the death of apologies, and they use all these really helpful examples. Prime Minister of Canada apologizing way too much for things that he's probably not responsible for, in contrast with President of the United States never apologizing for for anything at all.
Yeah.
And then they go into basically now we've created a legal system that discourages people from actually taking ownership.
Yeah.
So if I say I'm sorry, well, now I'm legally liable for that. And they kind of land relatively, I won't give any of the main details away. I encourage folks to go listen to it. It's a great episode. But the place that they land is, there's something about when a person comes and apologizes and takes ownership for the pain that they've caused, and they're willing to suffer the consequences of their actions, and be held accountable. I think there's a cruelty there's an equal cruelty in bad leadership as there is in somebody who's under leadership that will never allow that leader to ever make mistakes.
Yeah.
I think that both of those are postures that are that do a lot of damage. And I think that there's a lot of humility required on both parts. And fundamentally, in the Garden of Eden, the first sin was mistrust. The very first sin was, I cannot trust God. I cannot trust other people. I'm going to do this on my own. And I think that all of us are on this journey back towards what does trust look like? So I think that that's one thing, is that, when we are, if you're in a place where you're thinking about, how do I begin this journey back towards a trusting posture with a church community? I think that one, you got to go and check your expectations. Are you going in and you're expecting that the people in that community are not going to make mistakes? They're not going to, ever hurt you. They're not going to act like jerks sometimes. Is the pastor going to show up exactly the way you want? Like unrealistic expectations are premeditated resentment. You are already deciding before you even go in that you're going to get hurt and you're going to be resentful about it. So I think that that's one thing. The other part would be, this journey toward taking, I don't know if ownership is exactly the word that I would look for, but like, there's got to be this sense in which, okay, so in my own story, I have to own how deep my pain is over what has happened within my own church community. I have to own the fact, and I've got to name it. I've got to name the wounds and let them come out into the open. And then I have to begin to do the work of, how have those wounds begun to shape the way that I've done relationships? So in my story, there are people that love me. I know that they love me. I've withdrawn from them. They are collateral damage because my own ability to trust has been compromised in the last few years. And so, so I think that there's a lot of work that we have to do personally. We cannot control the way that other people behave. We can only make our own choices. Then there's a certain level of risk involved, and there's a certain level of we have to invite the Lord in via relationships to begin the work of healing. And sometimes that looks like therapy. Sometimes it just looks like great friends. Sometimes it's having a good spouse. Sometimes it's it's Bible study, and it's prayer, and it's meditation, and it's road trips, and it's good meals, and it's it's just like, it's not a thing. Right now we live in this age where we think like therapy will fix everything, and like it doesn't. It can't. Right. But it can help us. It can help us a ton. And so
part of me loves what you're saying. Part of me really hates it because I know you're right. Like Mary DeMuth has said, and maybe she was quoting somebody else, is like, when you are hurt in relationship, you will be healed in relationship. You just cannot just you and your therapist fix it all. You're going to have to get out there and practice doing the healthy things and having healthy boundaries with people and falling and succeeding time and again. And that's hard. It's really hard. And it's really hard to hear and to take in that I can only work on me. And I don't hear you saying it's your fault somebody harmed you. I hear you saying, what is the only thing we can do, right? The only thing we really have control over is how do we heal and figure out a way to move forward in a way that is healthy for us. And so we don't become what we hate. We don't become the thing that hurt us. I am an Enneagram 2, the most stereotypical Enneagram 2 Christian woman who wants to like make show up and do all the things, sign up for all the things. And learning about the Enneagram, realized it was because I really wanted to be loved. I just want to be I don't want you to just kind of like me. I want you to adore me and think I am really particularly special. And realizing that is a tendency for me has been something I keep in mind in my new church that we started going to a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half, where I'm like, what's really hard for me is that we're not members and I didn't sign up for all the things. And I have to just trust that I have value in a world that I do not know how to do this. This is a whole new thing. Like, can I just show up as Amy, who doesn't run all the things, doesn't sign up for everything, and still be valuable? And also, I'm not like trying to negotiate like some sort of like, look at me, will you love me? That has been hard.
It is hard, especially like for twos, the like emotional network within inside you, when you feel deeply loved and when you feel indispensable, like other people really need you, that emotionally feels the same. And so it becomes work on all of our parts to figure out what are the moments in which I'm settling for the synthetic version of the real thing that I want. And if I don't own that, let me just I'll give you another example. Like, well, we're not going to beat up on twos. Like, let's beat up on eights. We'll beat up on eights just a little bit. Like, but like, you look at someone's behavior like Driscoll. Now, Driscoll is beyond just eight stuff. So like, if you're listening to this, you're like, don't trash eights. That's not my point. I'm trying to say really unhealthy behavior of any type.
Yeah.
You take the unhealthy eight stuff all the way into the station, this need to be in control. This need to not let other people tell you what to do. This need to be able to defend yourself. Those are good needs, but when they get supercharged and you don't own the fact that they're supercharged, you have a lot of damage. I remember in my conversation with somebody, it might've been Sky Jatani, it might've been somebody else, I don't recall, but this idea that, fame really works a lot like the super soldier serum in the Marvel movies. It just makes whatever is bigger. So all of us, when we do our dog and pony show to try to get our needs met, whether that's I'm going to be as competent and as informed as possible, whether that's going to be I'm going to be the easiest going peacemaker there is, you take any of that and you make it ultimate. And it will grow into something that you never intended it to be. But I also want to say, like, we got to have some compassion for ourselves. We only know one way of being a me.
Yeah.
You know, if I knew another way to be a me, I'd probably do a different way, a way that's probably healthier. So the deal is this: a lot of that stuff, it worked for us when we were young. It does not work for us as we get older, and we're all learning. Okay, Jesus, how can I really keep my preeminent desire to love God and love other people as I love myself? Like, how do I keep that as the greatest desire and let everything else get in line after that? The problem is that the Enneagram shows us what happens when we reverse that, and to use Keller's language, when good things become ultimate things.
Yeah. Yeah. Working through that for me helped me to see that I let that desire to be loved and needed put people in a position of having so much importance and authority and way up there that was so misplaced. And so while, our plagiarizing pastor is not off the hook in any means, it helped me realize that my life was never about trying to make that pastor love me. That's not the point, right? That's not the point. And so in this new church that we're at, just recently, I'm not a member. I said, and I told you I'm not a member. We're showing up on Sundays. But recently my brother passed away unexpectedly. And, even though I'm not all the things at the church, every single staff member texted me and told me that they were praying for me and cared about me, wanted to hear about my brother. And I thought, I was overwhelmed with they care about me. And not because I did anything at all. And it was I don't think I could have had that moment if I had still been in that frenzied pace of sign up for all the things. And because I had been thinking through this, do I matter if I am not producing things for the system? Do I matter? And they answered that in a way that was just really powerful. And they didn't know I was asking that. I didn't have my arms crossed over my chest saying, I'm just daring you to care about me. I mean, I know our pastor knows I have a podcast. I can't imagine a pastor being like, oh, yeah, Amy Fritz coming to my church. Working through that has been a really interesting journey for me. They love me and I didn't do anything.
Yeah. But Amy, then there's this other part, right? Where you have to get to a place where you believe it.
Yeah.
You have to. And I think that when all of us are when we're not doing any level of self-reflection, we're living on, auto drive. The truth is that the moments show up in which we are being invited to stop believing the trances that we're in, wake up. And we don't, because we're just so addicted to our way of doing things. And so
oh man, though that muscle memory, Jesse, now I'm they love me. I should become a member. I should sign up for everything.
Yeah.
I should show them that I'm worthy of this.
Yeah.
And I have to be whoa, hold up. Slow down. It's crazy.
Yeah. But that's part of the great invitation, right? Is I heard somebody talk about, so I'm 43, and I heard somebody talk about this thing that happens in middle age, where we get to middle age and we begin to do the work of grieving a lot of our dreams that have not come to pass. All of us, in our youth, in our 20s, our 30s, we have a vision for what we think life's going to be like. We think
yes.
Eventually I'm going to change in this way. Eventually my spouse is going to change in this way. Eventually I'm going to have this career opportunity. Eventually we're going to have this economic freedom. Eventually. And then you get to your 40s and there's a slow waking up where you realize some of that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's a grieving. I mean, a deep grieving that just sort of works like a low grade fever that just sits on us. And it can happen with church communities for sure. I mean, I was positive I am going to the grave with these people. These are my people. And so there's just a grief that happens. And then there's this moment in that grief where we have a choice. I can either go back Now that I have more power, more influence, more autonomy, in a lot of cases, we might have more money, we might have a better career, whatever. We can go back and get all the things that we thought we could not have before, because now I've really refined my tricks. Or we can grieve. We can come to terms with the life that we do have, because it has a lot of beauty in it, even amongst the heartache. And we can begin to do that grief work so that in the back half of life, we can live different. And what I see over and over again that happens to a lot of people in middle age is that people that have been close choose different paths. And that's really devastating in marriages. It's devastating in friendships, where one person goes, I can't keep living the way I did the first 40 years of life. And the other person goes, no, I'm going to go do it again. And that's, we might call it a midlife crisis, but I don't think that quite conjures up exactly, the right pictures. But yeah. And so when I think about, even what you're describing, Amy, is you're like, I want this other path. I don't want to go do it all over again like I did it in the past. Like I want to do this, the back half of life, in a different sort of way.
Yeah. I so resonate with you saying, this is not my dream. This is not my dream. I did not dream I'd have a podcast where I'd talk about hard things to do with faith. I was going to have all the trophies for being the trophy child of the church. This was not my dream. So I am still sort of reckoning with that. No, I don't want to go back to the unhealthy, but I can so see that. I could so see that tendency to be like, well, could I just maybe try it again a different way? Maybe I could get the trophies and not love them as much. Right?
Yeah.
I have, but I don't know that I can have a healthy relationship with the trophies. They're not good for me.
Yeah. And for some people, and I think that's part of us coming to terms with who we are. Like some people could do that because they don't have an intoxicating effect on them.
Yeah.
But for some of us, we do certain things and we just kind of go like, I don't know what to say, except like, it's like I get drunk on the stuff, it just kind of does it for me in a way that's maybe not the most life-giving. And so, yeah.
How would you say the Enneagram can help us with our relationship with Christian celebrity in our life, and what position it should have?
Yeah. I think again, we can kind of come back to motive. There's some people that are going to be, they look to Christian celebrity, and we just live in a country where it's like, if something is popular, that means that it's successful, and that means that it's sound. But what we see in the Gospels is actually the opposite. Every time that Jesus sort of got a certain degree of fame, he would then go on to continue to teach truth, unchanging truth, and the crowds would dissipate and move on to the next, fad. And so, so I think that we don't need to, there's some people that just go like, oh, that person's popular, I'm going to disregard them altogether. Well, their fame alone is not a reason to disregard. Yes. Likewise, their fame alone is not a reason to trust them. Yeah. There are plenty of like very popular Christian books that when I open them and I read them, I just go, I'm just not seeing it. I don't understand really, what the beauty is and what the gospel is in amidst this. So all that to say is that when we approach fame, I think that if we don't, there's two things. When we're looking upwards at other people who have fame, I don't think we can disregard them or celebrate them purely based on the fame. I think it's going to come back to character, and it's going to come back to content. Likewise, for ourselves, some of us want fame, some of us don't care at all about fame. For those of us that do feel the allure of fame, I think that we really have to do the work of getting into our motives. What's going on that makes fame so appealing? I had a buddy of mine not long ago, like, busting my chops because I made the comment like, yeah, I just don't want to, post a bunch of stuff on social media. He goes, oh yeah, you just hate crowds. He goes, with all of your music efforts through the years and your multiple podcasts and your book project and your, and he said it like in a very like loving way, but he was also right. He's just like, don't sit here and kid yourself in front of me. If you're going to lie to yourself, go do it in private, and so I think that changes also, even for ourselves, the responsibility to understand our own desire for fame. What's going on? Why do we feel that we need it? And can we be content if we never have it? And in fact, if we really want to wield it well, in case we do one day get it, we need to do our work before we begin to pursue it.
Yeah. I think I have heard you say that you are an Enneagram 3. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it gets real confusing.
But you thought you were a 4, right?
Yeah. So for like
you
a
must have a
decade,
strong 4 wing.
yeah. So for a decade, I identified as a type 4, and then literally right as the book came out, I was like, oh, I think I'm a 3. And then, without airing like all my business on your podcast, like, my life has just been very complicated for the last year. And, so I think I think you kind of just spun me out in some very bad timing as I'm promoting a book. So all that to say is that, I did a coaching session with a trusted Enneagram friend recently, and she was like, no, I think you're still 4. You're just in the season where you're having to do
I
all
love
the
that,
3
Jesse.
stuff. Yeah. And
It says
so,
a lot about how stress impacts us. Like if you're in a really intense time, and like you have to be a certain way to get a book done and to promote a book.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I think in this scenario, she said she sees it all the time, that a lot of folks will get about a decade into their work on their Enneagram type. And she said that it happened. So, it was my friend Lisa Vischer. So it's her husband is Phil Vischer,
Yeah, I
who
know she does
did
a lot
Veggie
of
Tales and the
Enneagram
Holy
stuff.
Post. Yeah. So Lisa said, it happened to her, it happened to Phil, it happened to friends of theirs, like that about 10 years in, which is about where I am.
Yeah.
She said that a lot of times we've done so much work on our core type that we just get disoriented, and we really start locking into our wings because we get hungry for a different way of approaching life. Like, yeah, I've done it. I've done the 4 thing. I've done it. I'm ready to do something different. So, so I think a lot of that is what was happening. I think that overlapped with, I'm doing, all of the things you got to do to promote a book. And I think that's just very disorienting. And then you throw in on top of that, like, just some personal pain going on within my family, and it gets tricky. So unfortunately, for all my listeners, like on the podcast, I'm like, well, I said it all behind a microphone, which is not ideal, but whatever.
Kind of like, well, when you do a book too, like you change and grow too. Sometimes you're like, oh, I'm reading the book I wrote 5 years ago. I'm not the same person I was then.
Yeah.
And it's okay. We're kind of all going on a journey together.
Yes.
And I wonder though, with everything you've seen in the world with leaders crashing and burning publicly, maybe you were like holding on to that 3 in a way, saying, I need to be aware of the issues with wanting to succeed and wanting to win. Wanting to like make all the sales and be, I don't know. That's me just surmising that.
I mean, there is this truth. Like my number one prayer for the last 3 years is routinely is, Lord, give me the character for the station and the responsibilities and the relationships in life that I have. And I do spend a fair portion of time really fixated on trying to avoid that unhealthy side of the 3. The reality is that I do. I host a couple podcasts, and I've got a book, and I have to do a lot of media stuff. And there's a great allure within that. And so I've got a lot of that animal inside of me. So I want to own that reality. But yeah, it was funny. Yeah, I got a lot of people in my life are like, I didn't buy the 3 thing for a second. You were 4 all along. So so
I love it. Are you afraid? A part of me is afraid of success. Do you ever have like this fear of like, I'm afraid of failure, but I'm also like, at this point, I'm sort of afraid of succeeding too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think too, like there's 2 sides to that. Like I can get scared of the becoming my success, that I would be confused about what I do is who I am. I think that can become a very confusing thing. I also think, and I've learned this, with releasing a book, like there's such a cruelty in social media these days, where we just say things to each other that are just so mean-spirited. And the more that you're in the spotlight, the more that people will say those things about you, and they do not care. So I've had people insult me in all sorts of ways that I don't know who these people are. I'm not even convinced that they've even engaged my book, but for a variety of reasons, they see me as somebody that needs to be taken down a notch.
Yeah.
And so there's that side too, where I'm like, I don't know if I want the fame of, because of the cruelty that we direct at people right now for whatever reason. We just eat each other alive.
Yeah.
And Christians are the worst because God's on their side. So they can say whatever they want.
Yeah. We justify a lot in the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm rereading the book, The Way of the Dragon or The Way of the Lamb by Kyle Strobel and Jamin Goggin. It came out a long time ago. Did you ever read that book? It was
No.
absolutely amazing. They actually realized early on that there was some failures that they saw that in their own lives that changed their path, that saved them, they would say. And they decided to spend a lot of time listening to like the sages of the Christian life, like people that have done the work for a long, long time and had chosen the way of the lamb over the way of the dragon. I highly recommend the book, but they had to rewrite it because one of the people they wrote about was Jean Vigney. And then,
Oh yeah, sure.
after they published their book and even had like a conference, the news came out that this person had pretended to be someone that they were not, which is just really, really devastating. But I think it's sort of related to that, like, okay, now I learned a little bit about myself. What if I end up like getting on the path again that I was saved from, and will I be better this time? As we wrap this up, Jesse, I want to know, like, what is the most important reason you wrote your book and who is it for?
Yeah, I wrote the book that I wish that I had when I first learned about the Enneagram. A lot of the work around the Enneagram that's out there is really, really good. This is a basic, it's a primer. So if you're somebody that's like, I'm just now kind of getting into it, this is a great starting point. But I wanted to write one that was really deeply seeped in the character of Jesus. So a lot of Enneagram work is sort of, here's the Enneagram as a model, and now let's kind of just put it sort of a few kind of Bible verses around it. And I don't want to knock that. That's fine. I was looking for something though that would really force me kind of into the arms of Christ. Like, who is he? What does the gospel mean for my specific personality? How does the Father love me as his child specifically? I don't love my kids all exactly the same ways. I parent them different.
Yeah.
How is he parenting and loving me? And so a lot of the Enneagram work too that's out there is very like, it's kind of highbrow scholarly at times. Like, you need to have a certain level of education and acumen. And a few years back, I was invited to go and teach a Enneagram workshop for this little rural church. It was a marriage retreat, and a lot of people in the room were on second and third marriages. There was a lot of trauma in the room, a lot of recovering addicts in the room, a lot of 12-step kind of families in the room. And when I got to the end of it, this guy came up to me, trucker hat, tobacco in the cheek. And he was a mechanic, mid-60s. And he was like, when you came in here, I just thought, man, this young guy's just going to waste my time. And he goes, this workshop changed my life. It's going to help my marriage so much. And so there was a sense in which, and I can talk like that because a lot of my family talks like that.
Yes.
So it's not bad when I do it. So when I had that conversation with that guy, I realized I really want to write an Enneagram book that's accessible for a wide variety of people. And that's the exact feedback I've gotten. Somebody called me the other day and said, my mom never reads. She has told me my whole life that if I get emotional, I need to leave the room. And she said, your book was one that was simple enough she could understand it and enjoyed it. And she asked if I would read it with her, and we're getting together to talk about it. So it's, I really wanted to write a book that is for all people. So that's the book. I hope it drives you into the arms of Christ. I wrote it at the end of the day because my conviction is that the purpose of life is relationships, and that we need to do everything we can as people to build healthier relationships. And so, Amy, I would even end on this. Your earlier questions just about like, what do we do about our pain and our wounds, and what do we do about even taking ownership of our stuff. And I think so, what do we do about Christian celebrity and the evangelical industrial complex, all those things?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think an inner circle of healthy friendships and healthy relationships, that makes all the difference. If you look at all the devastation that so many people cause, they did not have that. And if they did, we could have avoided it. And any of us right now that we're in seasons of deep pain or hardship or confusion, do the best you can to build a tight community of friends around you. Invest in those people, because your life will find meaning as your relationships are meaningful.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. I'm looking forward to reading the book. I've heard great things about it. I know that my listeners will be grateful as well. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.